The easiest way to compare and order fractions, decimals, and percents is to make sure that they all are in the same form. That means you either have all fractions, all percents, or all decimals. And the way I'm going to show you how to do this is I'm going to change all of our numbers into decimals. And once they're all decimals, then they're easy to compare. So I'm going to start off with 1/2. To change a fraction to a decimal, in case you've forgotten, you take your numerator and you divide it by your denominator. So 1 cannot be divided by 2, so what I'm going to do is add a decimal point and a 0. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So I know that 1/2 is equal to 5/10. And that's something you might know just off the top of your head. Now, to take a percent and turn it into a decimal, what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine that there's a decimal point at the end of this number. And what we do for a percent to a decimal is we move that decimal 2 places to the left. So 65% is the same as 65/100. Now my next number is already written as a decimal, so I'm just going to leave it the way it is. And then finally 3/5, again, numerator divided by denominator. 3 can't be divided by 5, so I'm going to add that decimal and that 0. 30 goes into 5, or can be divided by 5 6 times, so my decimal equivalent of 3/5 is going to be 6/10. Now that they're all decimals, I can compare them. And eventually what I want to do is put them in order from least to greatest. That's what I'm told down here. So to compare these decimals, I want to make sure they all have the same place value. This is in the tenths, hundredths, tenths. So the easiest way to compare them is going to change them all to hundredths. So I'm going to add some zeros here so I can see how these numbers compare in the hundredths place. I have 50 hundredths, 65 hundredths, 42 hundredths, and 60 hundredths. So what I need to do is just figure out which is my smallest amount of hundredths. Well, 42 is the smallest amount of hundredths, so that's my lowest decimal. So I'm left with 50 hundredths, 65 hundredths, and 60 hundredths. Well, 50 hundredths is the next smallest amount, so 1/2 is going to come next. Now I have 65 hundredths and 60 hundredths. 60 is less than 65, so these last two numbers go into place like this. And this is how these numbers would be arranged in order from least to greatest. Now this method can also be used not only for ordering them, putting them in order from least to greatest or greatest to least, but it can also be used for just comparing two numbers. For example, here I have 65% and 6 5/10, and I want to know which of these two amounts is bigger. So I'm going to take this 65% and change it to a decimal, 65 hundredths. Well, I know this is already a decimal, so I'm comparing 65 hundredths to 6 5/10. Since this number here has a whole number, 6 wholes is much bigger than what I have here, so I know that that is the greater number. So my greater than, less than, or equal to sign would go this way. 65% is less than 6 5/10. Okay, 80%. Let's turn that into a decimal. So I'm going to get 8/10 for that. And then I'm going to take my 4/5, and again, let's turn this into a decimal. And when I do that, 40 can be divided by 5 8 times. So I know this is also 8/10. So I have 8/10 and 8/10, which you know are equal, so we would put an equal sign in here. And that's how you can compare and order fractions, decimals, and percents.